Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the September 30th edition of Beyond the Data. Sorry, this one got a little bit delayed, but this week has been a little bit crazy with the legislation that has gone through or not gone through, or the drama surrounding this. So today with us, we have Nadera Lopez-Garrity, right? I got the name right.
Yes, you did.
All right, and she is Vice President of Health Freedom Ohio, and below me here is Scott Shoemaker. He is the President of Health Freedom Ohio. And I connected to you guys a good while back when this all started, I think, and just following along with what you guys have been doing, working on health freedom, which, working on the ability to make health decisions for our own families, specifically in regards to vaccinations and things of that nature. So if you guys want to tell anything more about what you guys have been up to.
Yeah, absolutely. My name, like you said, is Nadera Lopez-Garrity. I've been advocating for several years now. I started with this after my daughter was injured by vaccinations, and I realized where things were headed, particularly when it came to vaccine mandates in the workforce. It was very personal to me because actually among the vaccinations that injured my daughter was the influenza vaccine. So it was something that's really near and dear to my heart. And I think at the end of the day, we have to try everything in our power to try to preserve what's most important, what's most sacred. And nothing is more important than, quite frankly, our rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I think this is all encompassing with that. And then coming from a country where we don't have the capability to advocate for our rights, it is that more dire for me, and I think valuable to continue this process as long as we are able to.
Yeah, and I'm kind of in the same boat. About 15 years ago, I had a son that was injured and diagnosed with autism. Also had a daughter that was injured. We kind of caught it early with her. When we figured out what happened was going on with our son, we stopped vaccinating our daughter. And, since then, actually, I'll go into it. We recovered him by taking this garbage out that vaccines put into him and cleaned up his environment and everything else. And I created a video and it went viral. YouTube took it down. We did a lot of local and national news stories 15 years ago. And actually, it was actually Facebook that took it down. But since then, I've been advocating, just trying to raise awareness and make sure people then end up having the same struggles that I did. As it's important. I think people don't realize that, you have these products that you can be injured from. And you meet people along the way that have the same story. And after you go through it, people look at you as going crazy. So look at you like you're crazy. But, now I was speaking with Nadera about it, 15 years ago. We were in better shape than we are now. That's kind of depressing, but, we're trying. See what happens.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, I've talked about it before as well, and I have the same kind of story where, again, you do the right thing, you get your children vaccinated, and then you find out, yes, indeed, they did get injured by those vaccines, and then you just become a whole lot more aware of what you are doing and what the decisions you are making, and that those decisions are not on the doctors. Those decisions are in your lives for the rest of your lives, for the rest of your children's lives, and you need to deal with that. And you have to critically examine what you are being told by medical professionals, because it's not always going to be really for your own family or personal benefit here.
You get gaslighted and called an anti-vaxxer, basically. That's what happens.
Yes, it is indeed what happens, even though it's not anti-vax. There's no such thing as anti-vax. It's former pro-vax, really, because that's how we get where we are. But one of the reasons, the main reason I invited you guys on is you guys have been doing this for a long time. You guys were way ahead of the curve. You guys have been advocating in the State House for even before you guys were, or at least Nadera was in HFO, before the creation, just trying to work with legislators to pass legislation, and this whole legal thing that's going on here that all of a sudden everyone is now involved with. None of us outside of this situation who has been advocating it for a long time, knows anything about it. I don't know anything about legislation. I mean, I kind of had a crash course basically in the last year and a half, but all of this, how it actually functions in terms of when you put out a bill and what happens after you get that bill and then it gets, amended, and the whole process, and how you actually read this and how the legislators act. You guys are deeply involved in all of that, and you have been for many, many years. So I ask you guys on today to walk us through some of these bills that have come out. And obviously, this week it kind of came out of nowhere. Basically, this leadership bill, HB 435, and we're getting whiplash here from this is definitely passing through, flying through it. Just absolutely. It's a done deal to it just gets stopped dead in the water. So do you guys want to talk about what was the process that happened over the last couple days, and what you guys know of what happened with 435?
Yeah, absolutely. So this has been quite the process, and as it was revealed during the hearing on Tuesday, now, it was a process that started 5 weeks ago, and Representative Seitz had revealed on there that Representative Gross had contacted him because Substitute House Bill 248, which is one of the strongest pieces of legislation that's currently still sitting, was stalled. So they had discussed collaborating together on a piece of legislation, and of course, 2 days later, the discharge petition was executed by Representative Gross, and ultimately a lot has unfolded behind the scenes in regards to this piece of legislation that we have now before us, which is essentially its leadership's bill. Now, one of the things that I think is important for people to realize that when it comes to our legislature is that leadership is very much in control. Any bills that they're allowed to be voted on, et cetera, it falls on leadership. So I'm talking a little bit about particularly 535. It was introduced on September 27th by State Representatives Phil Seitz and Rick Carfagna. They are all within leadership, or both within leadership, and they had the input from leadership, 6 individuals in total. So this bill seeks to amend section 412301 and enact various other sections of the Ohio Revised Code in regards to quote unquote vaccine requirements for employees and students. To say that there are multiple concerns regarding this legislation is quite an understatement. To begin with, it completely bypassed legislative process. It was introduced and fast-tracked through the House Health Committee yesterday? No, it was Tuesday, sorry. Tuesday now.
Tuesday.
Yeah. And although controlled discussions had occurred on the caucus floor, no legislators other than leadership, including committee members, had seen the bill till 5 minutes prior to commencing the hearing in the Health Committee on Tuesday. So, let alone the public, who were completely denied the capability of having their voices be heard via proponent, opponent, and interested parties testimonies, which is typically the case with any bill. So usually the bill is introduced, there's sponsor testimony, whereby they are officially introducing the bill into the committee, and arguing in favor of the bill. Then typically you have 1 or 2 proponent testimonies scheduled, then opponent testimony, then interested parties, then you can have the amendments, voting, et cetera, typically. Typically that's what happened. This one, no, actually completely bypassed the whole process. I think it's quite frankly a slap in the face to Ohioans, because they were not essentially given the opportunity to share their voices and share the concerns as it should be. So the only ones that were welcome at the round table and influenced the bill language besides House leadership team, according to Representative Seitz during the hearing, were the Ohio Chamber, the Ohio Business Roundtable, and the Columbus Partnership. Unfortunately,
I did hear actually from other sources that even those ones didn't have really, they were told the basics of what they thought was in the bill, and they didn't even have a seat at the table. I remember, I think it was Representative Russo even asked, or I believe it was Representative Russo who asked, who of the interested parties has been has seen this language before. And I believe Representative Seitz even said nobody saw it.
No, that doesn't mean that they actually saw the language. That means that they had sat a seat at the quote unquote round table to discuss it, but not necessarily seen the language. Again, nobody had seen the language except leadership and there's a select 4 individuals, and most of them were from LSC. So this was none of, as far as I've been informed, nobody from even the health committee had seen the language supposedly before that day. So,
and I just want to jump in here real quick. I mean, what would be the purpose of not showing people the language to your bill that you're going to discuss? You know, is it something that you're just going to try to slam it through? And maybe if people don't get a chance to read it, they might not miss something, or they might miss something. I mean, when I was standing out in the hallway and realized that this was the case, it just seemed very shady to me. And it was kind of disappointing. And I was sitting there with 2 lobbyists that had been lobbyists for 25 years. And both of them said the same thing. We have never seen anything like this in the history of our careers, that something is introduced right before the committee starts. So, you know, I'll tell you that, you know, when Representative Russo asked the question, you know, why nobody got to see it until 5 minutes before, you know, I was actually rooting for her a little bit. She's my representative. We don't see eye to eye on a lot of things, but I think all of us were sitting there shaking our head yes when she was talking about that. So
she seemed apologetic. That was the thing that made me laugh. Both Representative Russo and Representative Liston, who throughout this whole thing have been very pro-government control, you know, and definitely on the opposite side of things. They almost seemed apologetic in asking Representative Seitz questions and stuff, and it's just kind of. No, you ask those questions. Those are good questions. Please do ask them for us. But so getting back to kind of the process here as well, the other thing that confused me, besides this 5 minutes before that they got to see the language, even the people on the committee, how frequent is it that there's no proponent and opponent testimony? I mean, I'm total newbie here.
I've never witnessed such a thing. Never, ever. And of course, they gave the excuse that they heard a lot of testimonies from the prior legislation, or not prior legislation, but from substitute House Bill 248 and the original language of House Bill 248. But that does not account for this bill. This is a completely different bill. This bill merited the opportunity for individuals to share their voice, their concerns regarding this legislation, no matter what, you know, was going on within leadership, et cetera. So I think one of the things that's interesting is that Representative Seitz did come out and he did an interview whereby it was disclosed some of the content of the bill. And I know that this was, you know, obviously, you know, we disclosed this information, people were up in arms. So they already knew that people were not happy with it. And of course, they've gotten so much pressure over this past few months that my personal opinion is that they just wanted to expedite something to get it off their table and send it over to the Senate. But then again, there's a lot to this. One of the things I did notice during the hearing, or I should say after the hearing, is there was several representatives that we spoke to. And the first one that actually came to us and asked us our opinion in regards to this legislation was very excited, looked like a little kid in the candy shop and thinking that this is great. But then upon our responses and sharing our concerns and being very blunt about it, then it just everything kind of dissipated. So I think even with these sorts of individuals, which I know actually took a stand when it came to the possibility of it being voted out on Wednesday, which as a matter of fact was very much all the word was all day at the State House on Tuesday was that it was going to be voted out of the House and into the Senate come Wednesday, actually on both chambers. But, you know, these individuals, they listened. They started to hear from their constituents and fortunately backtrack. But, you know, the bill, like I said, was set for a vote. That was yesterday, received such a strong pushback from constituents that legislators who were formerly a yes vote on the bill backtracked as a result to listening to that, which shows how how important it is, right? Even when we think that it won't make an impact, it may make an impact, even if it is so seemingly minute, right? It's still a victory. And right now it's still a victory. So, you know, I think one of the things that's important to discuss is, you know, what does the bill do and not do exactly? It does not prevent vaccine mandates. To quite the contrary, vaccine passports are absolutely on the table, since businesses are allowed to require vaccines that have been licensed by the FDA for employment and for the public to engage in commerce with them, which means no consideration for civil rights. We know that the vaccines are being fast-tracked for FDA approvals. So far, only the Pfizer vaccine, specifically Comirnaty, has been approved, but it's not sold in the United States and therefore not administered in any of the 50 states, because it will not be protected from liability.
One of the issues with this bill is actually it did very specifically allow for the EUA version of the Pfizer BioNTech to be used, because the language was very specific that this would allow for any vaccine with just a biologic license approval. So we talked with Carrie a few weeks ago about this, where you know, these are not fully approved vaccines. They only have a biologic license. And this particular bill, whoever wrote this in the end understood the difference, because they very specifically put in that it has a BLA. It has that license, that biologic license, or an EUA product could also be inserted in there. So this thing has kind of skirted the whole issue of you cannot mandate an EUA product. It skirted this, because that's also in other things as well. You can't mandate something that's under an emergency use authorization. This bill allows for those EUA products to count towards this vaccine, essentially passport system that it was essentially creating.
Well, from the way of reading the bill, it allowed for vaccines that were approved by the FDA.
Oh no! So, and then they said also EUA. It's
well, like EUA was it's irrelevant, right? That other section of it, I know what you're talking about, but that is irrelevant, because at the end of the day, when it comes to this particular legislation, and I know that Maurice Thompson actually had contacted us and provided his some of his input, right? We know that right now a lot of individuals are facing being fired already. They have either reached their deadlines or are about to reach the deadline. So by the time this bill becomes law, it would be null and void. And as such, you know, the bill would have little to no impact, since deadlines for all known schools and employment vaccinations requirement are prior to 2002, and the likelihood is that this bill wouldn't be enacted till after the new year. So, and here I'm gonna. I would like to read, I'm going to pull this up here, a quote that he stated, and he said, you know, I'm going to go backtrack here a little bit. So such bills this bill in particular will have little to no impact, since deadlines for all known schools and employment vaccination requires are prior to 2022. As a matter of fact, he stated as well that because the bill proposes to provide coverage for those injured by required vaccinations, but only as to vaccinations required after the effective date of the bill, the most likely effect, if not only the effect of the bill, will be to expedite vaccination requirements as a condition of school and employment. That is very alarming, and that honestly it's very, I think it's yeah, I mean, I'll keep my opinions to myself.
You know, and you got to wonder, you know, we heard that, you know, half of the House was not advocating for this bill, so it didn't go anywhere. But, you know, I was talking to somebody last night, and I thought, well, I was talking to somebody from the Scott's company, and they told me that, you know, that their political person was saying, we got to kill this bill any way possible. So I'm sitting there thinking, okay, well, you got the businesses that don't like it, and then you got the people that don't like it. So now you got all these representatives trying to make everybody happy, and nobody likes it.
Well, it was an absolute nonsense bill. I mean, they had a section in here about the antibodies, where they were like, oh, we're introducing this whole concept of using natural immunity, and what was so shocking and frustrating to me is reading that section on how they were going to deal with natural immunity. It was really disturbing. These are our legislative leadership. We are what, like 19, 20 months into this. These people have access, supposedly, to our best experts in the state in public health and medicine. And yet what they wrote there was absolute pure nonsense, and it made no medical sense whatsoever. And even Representative Liston even stepped in and said, because what they had in here was about the antibody test, and this is probably an important point for any future legislation as well, because I think it's pretty clear that none of the current in place legislation is likely to go really anywhere. But it is important, whatever comes along, that natural immunity is acknowledged to exist. And it wouldn't surprise me if somehow this works it in here. But when this legislation talked about allowing natural immunity as being a way to get out of the mandates that your employer might have, well, first of all, it demanded that you be tested, and that ODH gets to determine the frequency of testing.
Mm-hmm.
So you have antibodies. That means you mounted an immune response, and you have long-term, B cell and T cell immunity that lasts longer, but they want to keep testing you at whatever frequency they wanted. And the only thing they were comparing it to, or going to compare it to, were antibodies produced by the vaccines. And it said it had to be equal or greater than the amount produced by the vaccines. Well, what is that? I mean, these vaccines are designed to elicit an extremely strong antibody response. So you have people with massive numbers of antibodies, circulating antibodies after the vaccine. And then you have the other side of the equation, where you have the immune compromised who are taking suppressive drugs, who are making no antibodies to the vaccine. So already right there, it's just like they're shooting themselves in the foot either way. This was written by somebody who has zero understanding of how any of it works, and it completely ignores the fact that natural immunity creates antibodies to the other proteins within these viruses. So
sorry.
I'm done. Rant over.
No, you're fine. I'm sorry. I'm like getting a little bit of interference here.
There you go.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So the other side to that is that the Department of Health would also have been entrusted with the responsibility to adopt the rules, right, establishing that antibody presence. And what I think is so outrageous as well from this, like just the whole premise of it, it's just completely backwards, but and nonsensical. But this legislation was drafted by those from the Republican Party who have been very much aware of the policies, the types of policies and the influence that has been involved behind these policies from the Department of Health. So I that's one of the things that also really struck me, and I mean, that's why we have SB 22, that is not necessarily a source to be trusted, yet they've been entrusted with this responsibility. None of it makes sense. And then this entire vaccine passport exemption would only so-called, because that's what they are. It's essentially a vaccine passport. Show me your private health, personal information to participate in society, but it would only apply to current employees, since they're also not available for new hires. Talk about discrimination from the get-go. They carved out provisions for healthcare workers and students who, are undergoing instructions or training whether it's, under the or in conjunction with institutions such as children's hospitals or hospital associations and organizations, and intensive care, critical care units. So the whole—
That's every hospital.
Pardon me?
That's every single hospital. Every hospital associated with an ICU or pediatrics unit. So that has exempted all of those. Carrie couldn't be here tonight, but she actually talked about her daughter is going into school for nursing as well, and her clinicals. When this came out, when this was dropped on Tuesday, all of her clinicals were put on hold because of this bill, and I'm still not quite sure how this all works together, why they did this specifically, but it had to do with this bill, and this bill would prevent anyone who couldn't be vaccinated with one of these vaccines from completing their clinicals, because all locations are affiliated with an ICU or pediatrics unit, and this particular bill would block that and not allow people to train in medicine without taking one of these vaccines. And it's just, where did it come from, and how in the world did they think that this would go through so quickly? It's madness.
Well, it's also important to know too that a lot of these hospitals, they get government funding through Medicare and Medicaid, and those healthcare workers are, pretty much getting burned under that, because we're going to withhold your funding if you do not vaccinate all of your employees. And I think it's that's one thing that people tend to forget, is that aspect of it. And
that was all initiated with Healthy People 2020.
Yeah.
Whereby, with the influenza vaccine, it was very arbitrary. Just a group of people got together and decided that by 2020, they wanted a 90% uptake of the influenza vaccine, and they tied it to the star rating reimbursement system. So there was really no scientific basis for it. And when you actually look at the scientific literature, it would completely, any rhyme or reason that this would be anything related to health is completely destroyed by the scientific literature. You have the Kershain reporting that those individuals who get vaccinated have a 440% increasing rate of contracting not only influenza, but other pandemic strains and respiratory elements, including COVID, the coronaviruses, So, and then on top of that, they are, according to PNAS, which is another very reputable scientific institution, they had reported and discovered that those individuals who receive the influenza vaccine are not only able to contract the virus, but they are able to spread it at 6.3-fold the rate of those who are unvaccinated. So how does that make sense, especially if you're working in an environment where you have individuals who are vulnerable? It doesn't. So none of this has ever been about health. That is the one thing that after years of doing this is for sure.
So comes the question in terms of, basically my premise has always been, like with my group page and everything that I put out there in the data world, what I from the very beginning, to me, what has been crystal clear is that nobody's going to come save us. There is no individual who can do it. There is no group of individuals who can do it. There's no organization that can do it. There's no group of organizations that can do it. All of the structures of government that have been put in place to protect us have failed. They've collapsed, that they are not functioning in the way that they need to. And the only way that this stops is if enough normal people step up and say enough is enough and stop complying or get active in some way, shape, or form. It doesn't have to be involved in everything, but getting themselves educated enough that they can talk to friends and family, or in this particular circle that we're talking in right now about the legislation. Again, 435 seems to have gotten stopped in its tracks, despite being pushed as, this is a shoo-in, we're done, this is all there is. And it got stopped because people called and emailed and demanded and had been talking to their legislators this whole time about just how ridiculous this is. So one of the things I wanted you guys to come on and talk about is, as I said before, as I understand it, none of the bills that are currently in play have much of a chance. I mean, House Bill 248 had the best chance. It had more people, proponent testimony than anything else. But because we have this situation where the national media will destroy the legislature if they put it through. I mean, that's human, that's psychology, that's human nature. I cannot see the legislators being willing to go through that 248 gets passed, and then national media says, oh, Ohio passed the crazy bill, even though that has nothing to do with what 248 is all about. I just don't see it happening. But we need 248. We need those components. We need to understand the pieces and parts of all of these bills and work towards getting our legislators to put them together and make a bill that actually functions and can be passed. So I don't know if I'm making sense here, but one of the things I want to get at is exactly that kind of, what are some of the really good pieces that must be in whatever we figure it out, and what are the parts that are like time bombs? Because I think you had said to me that there are like 7 bills or something that are currently kind of out there in the ether, but none of them really have that ability to go anywhere. So if you could talk about some of those, some of those aspects that are really positive things, and some of those aspects that are like, if this comes up in any way, shape, or form, go calling your legislators and screaming, no, this must not be there.
Well, I think that any bill that allows mandates is unacceptable. I mean, to force somebody to undergo a medical procedure, to keep their career is just, it's horrifying to me. And the one thing that stuck out to me in 435 here, it talks about, it basically talks about allowing mandates, but then later on in the literature, it talks about getting injured by these products that they're forcing on you. So it's like, yeah, we're going to give you these products and they could injure you and you could die from them. And it's like, does that really make sense to force something on people that could kill them? This bill in itself is a lot like the original HB 248, the original as introduced language of it. The as introduced 248, it allows for mandates, and it also sets up almost a passport system by way of exemptions. And they've incorporated a lot of that in here. And as well, this bill also, there's no penalty for any of the violations. So there could be rampant.
There are penalties, but they're not, sorry, Scott, there are penalties, but they're not strong penalties. And
right.
As we were I think it's important to note, one of the things that was brought up and, circle back around to the question, but it was specified and disclosed further the obvious, that the businesses do not want penalties. And we were informed that no bills will go through if there are penalties, which then, I mean, what's the point? If it cannot be enforced, if protection cannot be enforced, then we're just back in the same place. So that doesn't help anybody. But that is one of the issues that we're going through. And sorry, Scott, just wanted to point that out.
No.
So this is one thing I wanted this is one thing from my perspective. I don't know if I am just like so completely naive on this, but one of the things that confuses me to no end is, why is it that the businesses are so aggressively for these vaccine mandates? I mean, this is one thing where I can see where some larger businesses, ones that, are more interested in social justice and those kinds of things, why they might be interested in such a thing. But what makes no sense to me from the business perspective is, why would other businesses be interested? And the only thing that I can come up with is that it has to do with House Bill 606, which passed last year, which nobody talks about either, where I know that, as far as I understand, the continuation of House Bill 606 was actually part of HB 435. I believe that was in there, that it was that continuation of liability coverage. But the problem with the way this worked is it was to protect businesses and schools and say, oh, you don't have any liability if somebody gets COVID in your place of business or school or whatever. But it also, I can't remember the exact line, but I remember when it first came out last year, seeing this line in there saying that they did not have liability so long as they followed all the recommended safety procedures, which to me as a layperson, I read that and I think, well, if they don't have liability, if they follow the recommended procedures, doesn't that mean if they don't follow the recommended procedures, they do have liability? Is that what's driving these businesses to... I just don't understand why businesses would want to be involved in personal medical decisions of their employees. Why would they insert themselves in this, except for if they are liable in some way? If they don't, am I missing?
You mean besides the fear mongering factor of it all?
Yeah, I mean, there's the fear mongering, and there's the larger businesses, the social justice businesses, those kinds of things. Those make sense to me. But why would businesses that just want to do business?
Well, I think part of it is, these businesses are under the guise, or they're using it as an excuse that they want to do everything they can to protect their employees. However, the vaccine does not stop transmission. So if somebody is vaccinated, goes in with COVID, they can give it to somebody. If somebody is unvaccinated, and they get COVID and they go into the office, they can give it to someone. And it doesn't make sense to me, because I keep hearing that over and over again. Well, we're just trying to protect our employees. It's like, well, how are you doing that? How are you doing it with this vaccine when it doesn't stop transmission? And it doesn't make sense to me at all. The only thing that it might do is maybe lessen symptoms if you get it, and that's pretty much common knowledge by now. So it makes.
But the other problem is these businesses are also giving time off for when they get the vaccine, because they get so sick when they get the vaccine. So they're giving their employees time off, and they're saying something is fishy. I mean, if somebody in the sound of my voice knows what's going on here, I am very interested, and I don't understand this. This something here is not adding up at all.
Well, I was talking to a Supreme Court attorney, and we were talking about that very issue. And what he brought up was that the businesses are trying to stamp it out before the entire FDA approval comes along. And I don't know, maybe that is one of the issues with it. And I mean, and that is that's going to be quite an interesting process, right? Because one of their concerns is, with FDA approval, then you have the issue of liability. And unless it gets protected on the 1986 Act, then, it's a free-for-all, right? And with as many injuries as we see going on with this, right, it's an issue. And but then that's also why we see the push, right? Right now it's for 5 to 12-year-olds to get that consumption of that vaccine going. And as soon as they go through that, I mean, it's a demographic that it's not even at risk. So it tells you, once again, this is not about health. There's something else involved here. But so long as the kids can get that vaccination and it can be approved for children, then it falls under the protection. And therefore, then it is eligible to be approved in the United States, unlike the cometry where that's not utilized here, right? And that's why it's not utilized here. I mean, the ingredients are basically the same as the vaccine that is currently the Pfizer vaccine utilized here. But if they do, they have to face that issue of liability. So that was one of the things that he brought up, that it's likely that one of the contributing factors, not necessarily just it, but the contributing factors, is that they're trying to push as many people to get the vaccine now as possible.
Yeah.
And of course, there's that fear-mongering aspect of it.
Yeah, there's those people who are truly believing it, but there are also a hefty chunk of people who are also over it. And to back up a little bit there, I mean, you did mention the 1986 Act, and correct me if I'm wrong here as well in terms of how liability works. One of the reasons why pharmaceuticals might be pushing towards younger and younger age groups is that that if it is approved for children, then it can be covered by the vaccine court system. But if it is not approved for children, it cannot be.
Well, if it's added to the schedule,
if it's added to the
childhood schedule, then it's covered under the 1986 Act. There won't be any liability, and I think they're being very careful with that. Like, okay, we can't approve these yet because liability will kick in. We got to get it on that childhood schedule before it can be approved, and it's just kind of I don't think you'll see a gap in that because.
Yeah. They'll find a way.
And that's precisely why the influenza vaccine was pushed into the childhood schedule. And as well, now they're trying the same with Gardasil and the shingles vaccine, et cetera, et cetera.
They're trying to get that. I was just about to mention the shingles vaccine. So shingles is one of those vaccines that does not go through the vaccine court. It actually is you can sue the company giving you the shingles. You can sue the person giving it to you for causing damage to your arms and all that kind of stuff. And you don't have to go through the vaccine court system. And because it's not for children, but they're aiming for children for shingles too.
Yeah, precisely because of that.
That's the only reason.
So that would also explain why they're pushing so hard for children to get this vaccine, which has no business being given to children because they are not at risk, and they are not a risk. But just so people understand some of the structure involved here as well. When we're talking about this vaccine court system, it removes all liability from the drug companies that make it, and instead put all of the liability onto the taxpayer and to people who are being forced to take the vaccination. So you pay more to get the vaccination, and that pays into a system that can then pay out sometimes to people who are injured. So that's where this 1986 law comes into effect. It removes that liability and it puts it all on us. So that's great.
Well,
that might.
Oh, no, sorry. Go ahead. I thought you were finished.
I'm done.
Well, I think it's important to know, too. I mean, if these vaccine manufacturers aren't liable or everything, what incentive do they have to make sure every single batch that they pump out there is going to be safe? Like, maybe we put a little bit of too much of that in there. Don't worry about it. We can't get sued. Just let it go.
Well, that's why the FDA approved the distribution of those vaccines to different windows, so they wouldn't make the connection. Yeah.
So every lot is distributed across the country. So if you distribute them all in one area, there's a situation, I think it was in Tennessee, where they had a lot number and a lot of people were getting injured from this one lot. And they decided after that they were going to spread the lots out across the country for all the lots. So there wouldn't be pockets of injury. It's harder to see it.
It's much harder to see if it's not concentrated. Yep. And it's just accident. It's tragedy. But so hopefully that makes something make a little bit more sense about why we're pushing why Pfizer and et cetera are pushing so hard towards the children is to fill that liability gap. Although I have also been told that there is no liability gap right now due to some of the laws that have been put in place. And that's something I don't know. And I don't know if you guys know as well. Beyond things like the PrEP Act and things of that nature, if they would cover that kind of middle zone where we are with Comirnaty right now. Would you guys know? Or
I'm not there. I don't know.
Well, the PrEP Act comes into play because of the emergency use authorization. So right now, so long as we remain under a state of emergency, which is why it's so important for them to keep us in the state of emergency, then we can continue to, they can continue to push these products, these experimental products, because let's face it, that's what they are. And they are protected from liability under that PrEP Act. Now, in between, there's really nothing in between that I'm aware of that would protect them. And actually, as a matter of fact, that's something that we were discussing further with the Supreme Court attorney, other than getting on the childhood vaccine schedule. That would be the only way after the fact. And of course, they would have to be FDA approved. It would have to be approved on the children's schedule. And then that's how they get the protection. That's why it's such an important push in a demographic that completely makes no sense.
Yeah, they're going to stall the approval until it's on the childhood schedule, just so they have an overlap.
Or when they get Comirnaty to actually come out, because again, Pfizer-BioNTech is still under EUA. That is why there are two letters in terms of there's the EUA Pfizer-BioNTech, and then there's the biologics biologically licensed Comirnaty, which is of course not really available to get right now, but it's close enough to the EUA, which the EUA has the protection. Comirnaty, I'm still like shaky on whether or not it has protection, but none of us knows exactly if it does, but most likely it does not have the protection. But the moment we get past it approved for children, then it can all be covered again.
Yes. Comirnaty does not have the protection in the United States.
In the United States.
It does not. It does not. No.
That's why it's not here.
Which is why it's not sold here.
Not shady at all.
No.
All right, so we should probably try to circle back there to the business of to if you guys have any. So we have established that anything that allows for vaccine passports or mandates obviously is one of those things that cannot exist in any legislation that comes forward. So if any language allows for that, call your representatives, make them know that is unacceptable. Is there anything else you guys would say, oh, this particular aspect of that particular bill was one of those really great things that we need to make sure finds its way into something?
Honestly, I think there are some aspects from other bills, and obviously the best language out there was substitute House Bill 248. And there's some other language in other bills that, can complement each other. At the end of the day, if you look at the language from all of the bills, nothing would protect us better than what's in that piece of legislation. So everything else basically would be unnecessary. Like, one of the bills from Jay Edwards, which is, it's a phenomenal bill. Like it actually would place liability on businesses that try to mandate the vaccine. And in the
401.
Here, 401.
HB 401.
Yeah, HB 401.
I've never even heard of it.
Yeah,
that
workers can sue the employers for damages if injured if they mandate the COVID vaccine.
Yeah. So that one would amend section 412301 and would enact other sections that would exempt basically, it would change the revised code to exempt an injury or disability caused by their employer mandated COVID-19 vaccination from the workers' compensation law and allow the employee to sue the employer for damages. Now, granted, I mean that the manufacturer is still not liable, but if you don't have, my point is that if you don't have the capability to mandate or to install vaccine passport, then there is no need for any of this, right? So. But, the reality I think we still really need to talk about is 435 is not dead. 435 was re-referred to the, I'm having a brain fart right now, the Rules and Reference Committee.
Rules and Regulations.
Yeah. Rules and Reference Committee, which, essentially goes back, the leadership is going to be negotiating to try to get those 28 or so legislators who were completely opposed to the current language as a result of people taking a stand. But that's what they want to work. And my point there is that individuals need to remain vigilant in continuing to press their legislators not to vote for this particular bill. But they're working the language. We don't know as of right now what that's going to result in. But we need to remain vigilant and see what's going to go on and see how we need to press. No different than what just happened, because that they're in negotiation process right now. It does not mean that it's off the table. This is what they are bound and determined to push one way or another.
Is there anything redeemable in House Bill 435?
Not with the current language.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, anything that remains from the current 435, we all, as witnesses here, know that that is all bad. So if there's anything that they negotiate out of it that has any of the retained language, then yeah, we can already say this is a bad thing. There was nothing that you guys saw in there that was in any way, shape, or form redeemable. I didn't see anything, but I'm not.
I think it's because it's all, it's all based on mandates, and mandates are unacceptable.
Bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's your answer.
I think anything at the end.
No, go ahead.
Sorry, Scott. No, go ahead.
No, I said anything that has mandates actually is unacceptable here. And the other thing that this outlines, and I think people don't think much about it, is, let's see, I was going to find that part of it, where let's specify the bill does not limit, diminish, or affect limitations on employer vaccine requirements contained in state and federal law. So basically anything else can trump this anyway. So if Biden's mandates, if they go through and the challenges are not, if the challenges are squashed on them, then it would kind of make this obsolete anyway. Hopefully that'll never happen.
It's a crazy world. Here's a question for you.
Are the guests opposed to anything that codifies this? Opposed to anything that codifies it?
It codifies exemptions.
Yeah. So I think this is kind of the question in terms of like what the original language of 248 was as well, where because of the way it was originally worded, it put those it codified those exemptions, but at the same time it then, because it created that exemption world, you started to have the ability to ask for them, kind of thing.
The way I look at it is, if you have exemptions, then that means there must be mandates.
And so therefore
you don't need exemptions if you don't have mandates.
So the answer then,
well, no, beyond that, I think, anything what is it that we want, right? As individuals, what is it that we want? What we want is, we don't want any vaccine mandates. We don't want any vaccine passports, right? Ideally, I think anybody who's fighting for medical freedom, informed consent, bodily autonomy, that is the ultimate end goal, right? Especially with everything going on. Now, anything that would require us to disclose our personal, I guess that's the question. What is the vaccine passport? You have to disclose your personal health information to participate in society. And if you don't have strong penalties, then it becomes null and void, which is part of the big problem, I think, with everything, and even 435 or any, the original language of 248, is if you do not have strong language, then it doesn't matter. I mean, as a matter of fact, look, we couldn't have a stronger codification than we have the religious accommodation aspect from Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. And yet individuals sometimes are denied that. Why? Because there are no, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, it's the ones that are the strongest. It's actually the strongest. People should always go towards the religious accommodation. But there are some instances that, they make it a struggle. So if we're going to have any sorts of legislation with any sorts of vaccine passport, anything, mandates or otherwise, or trying to avoid that, we're not going to get anywhere unless we have strong penalties. That is the reality. And this is why, we are in a very, very difficult situation here, and it's nothing new. In the state of Ohio, businesses have personhood. And that is something that has been utilized over and over again. It doesn't matter what legislation is amongst Republicans. And again, it's been disclosed that they absolutely are not willing to pass a that has any strong penalties. And it's something that we need to push for more, to have any hope of anything being effective in terms of trying to prevent any kind of coercion amongst individuals. Really, what we're dealing with is a civil rights movement, a medical apartheid, right? A group of oppressed individuals. And I'm very much inclined to believe that we do not absolutely get ahead by giving in to our oppressors, no matter how minute. That is completely counterintuitive.
One thing about the exemption situation that I just became aware of, a situation that happened in the state where somebody, an individual, I'm assuming a parent or something in a school district, filed a public records request to find out the exemptions claimed by teachers within their school district, and they were granted this information. So they were granted the information of the exemptions, which staff members, or not only staff members, I think it also even applied to visitors coming in. But that information, those exemptions, became they were handed out to some member of the public to do with that whatever they wish to do with it via a public records request. The moment you write something down, it's written down, and it can be used however you want to use it. I mean, this is not something to be considered lightly. I mean, when I first saw that first language of 248, I had the exact same reaction there as well, where it's like the moment you write it down, it can be used in whatever way they want to. Yes, they might say, oh, it's codified now, but a couple of years down the road, we're going to start picking those things off like they did in New York and California. And don't write anything down.
And it's your personal information that's out there for everybody to see.
Yeah. And even if it stipulates verbal, which, by the way, was brought to my attention, there's a legislator that the initial language did not include verbal. That was inserted because a legislator had issues with the languaging of the bill. So, but regardless, they certainly do not make it easy on us, do they? And when it comes to our children exemptions, what is one of the things that we've had to do over the past years? We've had to really fight really hard to maintain them. They try to remove them through the budget by sneakishly putting an amendment in there to remove it from our private schools, at the same time that they were simultaneously trying to undermine them with House Bill 559, whereby they were trying to have a family physician sign off on a religious exemption. I mean, talk about complete violation of our constitutional rights. And we know exactly what that would have led to. And then we attended the AAP Ohio conference, whereby Dr. Amy Acton actually was speaking at the time, and they had disclosed, and we had recorded them stating that they have every intention to remove our opt-out options. So it's a continuous upward battle with this. Aside from the fact, again, you're back to the entire disclosure that makes people vulnerable, right? Or puts people in a vulnerable situation. And yeah, it's not easy, that's for sure, but necessary, right?
But we're constantly watching our backs, just things being slipped in as amendments. It's not always obvious as it is just a new bill, And that's one of the things we learned from that event that we went to is, we're on top of the bills, but let's get sneakier and throw things in the budget or some other bill, and let's see if we can just slide it through without our knowledge. So we have to be on top of our game.
Yeah. So whenever these bills start to drop, it is one of those things that we cannot, shove our heads in the sand, and we have to pay attention to what is being done here. I know so many people, because it's been over a year and a half now that we've been going on about this, and people don't believe that it will keep going, but it will keep going. We cannot ignore these bills. And as much as I really hate reading legislative language and trying to think like a lawyer or a legislator or whoever is writing these bills, we do have to maintain our understanding, call our legislators when we know, because that happened, that really fixed this, or not fixed it, but at least stopped it in its tracks from being pushed through without any discussion whatsoever. So we need to stay engaged. And we're coming up about an hour here. Is there anything else you guys want to add before we call it a night here?
I think the most important thing is that individuals, and you mentioned it earlier, I think individuals need to really look within themselves, be their own leader in this, and not look to anyone else for that. They need to start really advocating for themselves and knowing that they're the ones at the end of the day nobody is going to be a better advocate or strong voice for this issue than yourself, because nobody knows your story better than yourself. Nobody knows your truth better than yourself. Nobody knows your needs better than yourself. And I think people need to realize that. And truly, at the end of the day, when it comes to the current situation within our legislature, you know, those individuals that are not standing for our constitutional rights and freedoms, they do need to be primaried. But what do we need for that? We need individuals to be able to step up to the plate and be willing to take over those roles, because otherwise, you know, we just have more of the same. And to do that, what do we need? We need the support of those individuals who are willing to take a stand, and not just give up on them and say, you know what, you know, like they don't stand a chance. Well, that becomes part of the problem. And truly, we need the masses involved in this to be able to make a difference. Yeah. Otherwise, we just get more of the same, and we're working within the same system that, you know, that's led to this so far.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think the masses need to rise up. I mean, it's gotten to the point, you know, if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to keep getting what you got. So you do have to make changes in what you're doing. But I think the biggest thing here, and my final thought is, any bill that allows for any type of mandate that violates bodily autonomy in an individual is unacceptable. Unacceptable. I've known people that have been bullied into getting this vaccine, and they are absolutely miserable. They're having, like, you know, seeing counselors and things because they just feel violated, you know, and they have remorse that they gave in. And, you know, I think that's another problem that we might see if people do give in, is what's their mental state going to be like, you know, not to mention there are other injuries if they get them. Nobody knows what the long-term effects of this vaccine is. It shouldn't be forced on anyone. You know, even if we didn't know that, it shouldn't be forced on them. So
I think, as Margaret Mead said, you know, never doubt that a small group of committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, that's the only thing that ever has, right? And I think this week pretty much showed it. We had a bill, a horrible bill that was going in, adamantly going, you know, for that vote to be passed out of the House and keep moving. And individuals rising up and actually contacting their legislators did. No matter what anybody says, that did help put a stop to it. So we need more legislators yet to take heed. We need more individuals to take a stand. And for those who are not taking heed, okay, let's primary them. And we need individuals to fill those roles, though, because it's one thing to just say that we're going to primary them, and then there's nobody that's actually going to stand up for our constitutional rights and freedoms. So at the end of the day, I think Ohioans deserve better. They deserve the best, and they deserve to have their unalienable rights protected from the system of discrimination that has been allowed to proliferate. And no thanks to this medical apartheid that's just really seeking to oppress and control the masses. But it makes a difference.
Every single, even if you don't think it does, each person who does adds it up. So take action, whatever it is. Educate your legislators, or, you know, tell them don't do this. Stand up, do it. So I think that's a good place to stop tonight. Thank you guys so much for coming on and talking about the legislative mess that Ohio is. And there we go.
Well, thanks for having us.
Thank you so much, Catherine.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Thank you.